Okay. That is in fact grey. Now how about this one? What color do you see now? Same grey. Well, if I turn off the green, you'll see magenta, and if I turn off the magenta, you'll see green. This is actually a combination of the two. If I zoom in on that, you'll gradually see the pixels. Every alternate pixel is magenta or green. And when you combine the two, they cancel each other out and you get grey. So green and magenta are opposites, that's proof. Pretty strange. Every color has an opposite. The opposite of black is white, the opposite of purple is yellow, the opposite of cyan is orange. So colors have opposites. And that's proof of it. There's another one here made of cyan and orange. Again, if I turn off the orange, there's cyan. If I turn off the cyan, there's the orange. And if I zoom in, you can see the two together. The unusual thing about that is that when they're combined, they are essentially the same gray as this, which is, this one is truly a gray. By the way, you can turn off layers just by running the cursor up and down like that. So this one, that's true gray. That's a grey made up of magenta and cyan, magenta and green. That's a grey made up of cyan and orange. And they are the same. Neutral grey. I love this stuff. I love playing around with colour. Anyway, I just thought you'd get a kick out of that. Here we've got some other things to play around with. The face on the left, that's the original photo, and the photo on the right, I've got a variety of different ways of dealing with it. And you can see it's been retouched considerably. Now, there's an ethical question here, okay? For this whole section, there's an ethical question, because this can be very highly paid work. But anyone involved in this kind of work has to also accept that they are responsible for making images, fantasy images of humans that other humans might believe. Okay? So the techniques in and of themselves are neither good nor bad. They're just techniques. Like a tool is just a tool. But how you use it can be positive or negative. So if you are involved in this kind of work, think very hard. There's an analogy about graphics. Some kind of work in graphics and also in Hollywood is like climbing a big pile of manure in order to pluck the rose that grows at the top. And those who climb long and hard and ruthlessly get to the top and they pluck the rose only to find that on the way they lost their sense of smell. So it's kind of like that. So, that aside, rant over, let's have a look at it. Here we've got the original image, and obviously, because this person is a normal human being, they don't have a perfect skin. However, if we get in there with a healing brush tool, we can probably fix some of that. So just by alt-clicking here and there, we can take care of minor blemishes, and you can see that the cursor is, the cross here is returning to the source point every time. So you can just gradually remove minor details like that. I mean, the healing brush is a really incredible tool, and it's very tempting to do a little bit of work like that on any kind of photo that you have, even of yourself. So now that's comparatively blemish-free, that face. That's a long way from this one. You see the eyes here? Let's focus in on those eyes a little bit. Compared to the eyes here, these have a whole different quality to them. And it's quite easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that. First of all, we need to make a selection of her eye, I guess that's the iris, isn't it? Yeah? That round thing? The bit in the middle is the eyeball, right? Or is that the whole thing the eyeball? The pupil. Okay. Obviously, I really know my way around these technical terms. So I'm going to zoom in on the eye there. And if you want to make a selection of a circle and you want to do it accurately, you can pull in a guide from the rulers at the top and another one from the ruler at the side, so that they line up with the piece you want to select. Then get the elliptical marquee tool, and if you want a perfect circle, you hold down the shift key as you click and drag. And there we go, there's a perfect circle that just covers that entire part of her eye. Now when you make a selection, if you don't select anything else, you can drag that around either with the cursor, or you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard, so you don't have to get the position of it exactly right first time. You can change that later. I don't need these guides anymore, but I'm not going to try and drag them away with the move tool. I might lose the selection. You can just go View, Clear Guides, they're gone. Now we'll go to the Channels window, and I'm going to click on the Make a Channel from the selection. There it is. There's my little eye sitting there. Now if I move this up a little bit, you can see what I've got here. I've got that white area, which was my original selected area. Now I've moved this selection up, and I can keep on moving it. You can keep on moving it around, so long as you're not selecting another tool instead. Maybe get it to about there, and then fill it with black, which I've got as my foreground color. So Alt Backspace fills a selection with black, and then I'll deselect with Control or Command D. And now I've got this crescent moon. And now I'll go back to the image. If I hold down the Command key and click on that, there's my selection. And if I go up to the Refine Edge window, I could make that selection smaller. Now, in order to be able to work with that, I've got to have an image inside it. So I'm leaving the channel behind for now. I've gone back to my image, got the RGB channel selected, the original layer selected, and now I can go to Refine Edge and choose Feather to soften that a little bit. There we go, about like that. That'll work fine. Okay. Now I make a new layer and fill that selection with white with Command Backspace, because I've got white as my background color. And again, Command D. Now probably I shouldn't leave her looking like that, right? So first thing is turn down the opacity a little bit, and then maybe use Command T and hold down the Shift key while I click and drag to reduce the size of this whole piece, and press Enter when I'm ready, and then keep turning down the opacity a little more until I've actually got that. So that's one way that you can add a little bit of life to somebody's eyes in an image. If sometimes people's eyes, you know, they're a focal point. When we look at somebody's face, what do we look at? You know, look at somebody in the room. You look at their eyes. Because we feel when we're looking at somebody's eyes, we're talking to them. Yeah? There's a presence in the eyes that isn't elsewhere in the face. That's how we make a connection with somebody, is look at their eyes. So eyes are very, very powerful expressive objects. And that is unusual and interesting, and so we're likely to look at it more. Okay, let's see what else we can do. So if I click on this face for a moment, and I'll just zoom out to full image view, you can see there's still quite a few differences. She has an unbelievably smooth skin, doesn't she? And of course that's just not possible unless you're working in Photoshop. Then you can do this stuff. So one thing I've done here is I've added, I'll just turn the eyes back on there, this layer which is called Screen and Surface Blur and Eraser. Now if I turn the other layers off, you can see what I've got on that layer. Spooky, isn't it? So let's try that over here. I'll make a copy of this layer, Command J, And now I'm going to use the screen mode for it, that's screen mode, much brighter, and run a surface blur on the whole thing. So that's up here. Sorry, that's not there, that's under filter. Filter, blur. When you're using a blur, you've got several good choices. You've got a Gaussian blur, which is an overall blur everything. And it's very good because it's editable. And you've also got one or two others like lens blur, motion blur. Surface blur is possibly even more useful than Gaussian blur because it doesn't blur the edges. It blurs everything but the edges. Well, it blurs the edges a little bit here, but it's blurring her face a lot more. So if I click on OK there, oh, let's see. Hold on. Let me just undo that. I'll put that up again. I'm going to erase away areas that I don't want in a second. I'm going to use a threshold of 25. The threshold determines how much of the image is affected, but I think for the radius I'll give that something a little higher. There we go. Look how smooth that all got. If I turn that up even more. That's before and that's after. You see what that's done? We've still got detail. It didn't fuzz that detail out completely. And that's the great thing about surface blur. Gaussian blur, that hair would be a fuzzy mass of gray. Well, it's not very complimentary to it, but it would be. Anyway, that's the entire image with surface blur on it. The eyes are still comparatively sharp. The hair is still there. If you want, of course, you can get in there with the eraser tool. And we'll get a slightly bigger brush on that. And I want a soft edge brush. And then I could erase away. Actually, I'll turn the opacity down on that to about 55. Erase away. Now that's pretty compelling, isn't it? And I could also erase away around here, if I wanted, to darken the outer area, which means you're going to focus more on her face. Like that. Back to this one again. Couple of layers that I've got up here. One is for her lips. So let's have a look at what's on that layer. And that's it. Not much to it, but it's obviously brightening things. So on this one, let's go back to the original, zoom in on the girl's lips. Get the freehand lasso tool and again just make a selection around that whole area. And it doesn't really matter if I'm accurate or inaccurate here. I can deal with it later. Refine edge just to soften the edge of that a little bit. And then Command J puts her lips on their own layer, which I'm going to bring up to here. This may need a little work. First of all, I can lighten that a whole lot. And I can also get in there with the eraser tool. Whoops. And with a soft edge eraser, get rid of the areas that I don't want. Let's turn that back up again. That's what I meant about you don't have to worry about whether you're being accurate or not to begin with. You can fix it later. Okay, that's a bit better. I could use curves on that in order to accentuate the contrast on those lips. If I wanted to, I could use hue and saturation and change their color. There's kind of no end to this. You have to know when to stop, really. One thing is we've got some sort of shadowing here under her eyes, and on this one, I kind of got rid of it somewhat. So that's what I did with this layer. If I make a selection of this part of her face with the freehand lasso tool, and choose the layer that I want to copy from, like maybe this one, and then go Command J there. Let's pull that up to there. Very strange. Now I'm going to use screen on that again, and whoa, too much. Let's turn the opacity down on that. There we go. And again, surface blur. Filter, blur, surface blur. And I'll turn that up to, let's go a little higher. It's thinking about that. Let's just change that a little bit. You can just see that. Smooth that a little bit. It's a little bit too bright here, so I'll turn the opacity of that down just a fraction more. There we go. Spooky, isn't it? It's not that hard to do. It's definitely questionable. Something else I did here was to add this layer. All this is a mask that applies a blur. So I just made a selection of the whole image, erased away her face, and applied a blur to it, and that's what gave me that layer there. As I said, there are lots of things you could do, whether you thought that was necessary to do or not. Possibly so, possibly not. Now if I merged all these layers together, then I might start working on the actual shape of her face. So now I've got it looking maybe the texture that I wanted it to look. Then I could actually start working on the shape. I'm not going to merge all these together because I'm probably going to want them for the course I'm doing tomorrow. So I'm just going to close that one down now. And I'll show you another image where that has been done. So there's a photographer in Venezuela who was over here a while ago. He's got a team of people working with him because he's doing high fashion photography over there, and his team of people are then adjusting what he's doing in Photoshop. And he came over here because he wanted to know what the heck they were doing, because the image that he took was actually that, and that's what they did to it. Okay? Now if I zoom in here, for instance on her arm, you can see that, well, here's gravity in action, and now you see it, now you don't. That is changing the shape, right? Now that's fairly easy to do. They've done a few other things here as well. Blemishes like this, a thing of the past. You know, this person is perfect, and therefore impossible. Let's have another look. Her chin. They moved her chin. And that is done using the Liquify tool. If I go up to Filter and Liquify, and I can zoom in on this image. This top tool in the Liquify toolbox allows me to grab part of the image and move it. Now, this is a great fun tool to work on photos of your family that they didn't know you took, and then give the results back to them, birthdays and Christmas, things like that. They will loathe Photoshop, okay, if you do that, but it is kind of fun. Now I can grab that chin and just move it. And it stays reasonably sharp. That's the scary thing. You can do terrible things to people with this tool. They should never have invented this. That's what my family think. I disagree. I think it's a fantastic tool. So that's how a lot of the actual manipulation of the shapes occurred in these images. Of course, they did rather more than that when they were deciding what to do with the background. I really love what they did to the background. It's It's like you've got this, murky lagoon with God knows what floating in it, and suddenly it's just beautiful, pristine. This other image as well, same kind of thing. There's the original, and there's what they did to that. Isn't that great? What they did to the people maybe is another matter altogether. So let's have a little look at that. So I'm going to focus on her right knee. Okay, no particular reason. I just happen to like her right knee. So that's been turned to this. So I thought you might be interested in seeing how that kind of thing was achieved. So I've got another little image here called New Leg. And it's a straight copy of this, you can see. It's just the same. Now I made a selection of part of her leg. And I'll load that selection now. There it is. Now how did I load that selection? I command clicked on that little icon there, that thumbnail, right? How many of you, just be honest, how many of you didn't remember that? Just put your hand up for a sec. Go on, I dare you. Yeah, it's difficult to remember, right? And yet it's so useful. I've used that, what, 5, 6 times tonight? I mean, I use that all the time. It's so useful. And if you don't know that one, you've got to figure out, how to do it some other way. It's really useful. Please remember it, okay? Very good, all of those of you who didn't put up your hand. You're either congenital liars or you've got it. Well done. Okay, so now I've got this selection here on this, and I'm just going to go Command J just for the heck of it and copy that leg to a new layer. Now, these icons across the top of the layers window allow you to lock attributes. And that one locks any pixels that are currently transparent. Now clearly, if I turn that layer off, I've got part of her leg on a transparent background, and if I've locked this, it means I can do what I want to her leg, sort of, within reason, without affecting the transparent pixels, so I can blur it. Now there's various different ways that I could deal with blurring it to kind of smooth the texture. One of them is median. So I could go filter, noise, median. And here's the median filter, like that. That's pretty good, isn't it? That's given me this incredibly smooth texture that may even be more than I need, really easily. If you render a whole image using median, it's a little bit like you end up with something that looks like paint by numbers. It's a little strange, but it does have this incredible smoothing quality. I could also choose filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Now this one's got some kind of problems because it's blurring the edges as well. They're getting translucent. So you probably wouldn't want to use that in this case. So Gaussian blur, while it's a very useful filter, probably isn't the one to use here. Let's have a look at surface blur. So I'll go back to blur again and choose surface blur, which is also an editable filter. If I turn that to 0, so well, close to 0 as I can really, everything's being affected, and set that to 44. This is the same degree of blur that I was using on her face, and it's not doing quite what I want. If I turn off the preview, it's not really having the effect that I want here. So in this image, median is probably the way to go. So I'm going to add a median filter. Noise, median, and we'll turn that up a bit. Maybe that's too much. That's about right. Now one thing that I can just see that I forgot to do is at the top here, there was a little patch of light on her leg, and that's doing weird things under the median filter. So I might want to fix that now before I go any further. And if I get the clone stamp tool, I can just take part of her leg here and clone it right across, fixing it. How about the highlight? I've lost the highlight a lot. That's been smoothed using median as well. I can put that in using a path. Now this is a pretty unusual technique. The path is a vector drawing tool, and vectors and pixels are totally opposite things. Vectors do not rely on pixels, so they're infinitely scalable. Pixels do rely on pixels, so they're not infinitely scalable. And Photoshop, although it's primarily a pixel-oriented program, does allow you to do a certain amount of stuff with paths. I already happen to have a work path here, but I'll just show you. It's like the Blue Peter School of Photoshop. I'm going to get the paths tool. That's the pen. And the pen's a great tool. I'm just going to click here and start clicking and dragging. And, oh, excuse me, made a mistake. I should have chosen that central icon first. Now what have I done? Get rid of that. Okay, back to the paths tool. Let's turn that off. So I'll start clicking and dragging here. So this is a simple vector path with no fill, no stroke, nothing. And I'm just going to follow more or less the contours of her leg. Now if I want, using this tool, I can click on an anchor point and change the orientation of the handles. I can move the entire path around. I can drag anchor points here and there. This other tool, the path selection tool, does literally allow me to move the entire path. But I find that much less useful than the direct selection tool, which you've also got in InDesign and Illustrator, because you can move individual anchor points using that tool. Now the great thing about a path is that I can apply, if it was an enclosed path, I could apply a fill to it. If it's not an enclosed path, I can apply a stroke to it. That's Adobe's word for outline. So I can apply an outline to this path. And which outline I apply to it depends on the last brush that I used. So there's lots of different tools, all of these, that count as brush tools. First of all, I'm going to make a new layer, because I don't want to paint all over the top of this leg. I'll drag that down to here. That's where I'm going to apply what I'm going to do. And then in the Paths window, if I choose Stroke Path, I'll go back to that one. That's interesting. I'm going to save that first of all as Path 1. And then now we're going to, it's not going to let me do the stroke path. Oh, because that's not visible. Okay. Sorry guys, I was just getting confused here for a second. I can now stroke the path, and I can use whatever tool I want. There's a whole list of all my brush tools here. But it's going to use the last brush that I used. So if I go to the brush tool and find out what size brush I've got, I'll make that a bit bigger. And then set the color that I want it to use, which is going to be white. Then in here I can say, okay, now I want you to stroke that path using that brush on this layer, like that. And it looks a little strange right now. If I click in the gray area below this path, the path itself is turned off. Now I can start working on that layer with the eraser tool. And I'll turn the opacity down a little bit here. Actually, I'll leave it at 100 to begin with. And I'll turn down the opacity in a second. And what I'm ending up with is a highlight. Now I'm going to turn that down to about 50, and I'll reduce the opacity of this a little as well. There you go. And that's how a lot of this stuff was done. It was by painting paths with white to make a highlight, and then working on it with the eraser tool to tone it down a bit, and applying a median filter to the basic shapes first. And if you use that technique, you can turn a picture of a normal human being into something that's utterly impossible. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul. Anyway, I guess that's about it. I can't really take that one any further.
That's right, show the video. Show the video. Show the video.
Oh, show the video.
Show the
Oh, I'm
video.
going to show the video. Okay. What was there, right? Where's it gone?
Dot.
Whoop.
On the dot.
On the dot.
Right.
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 Left. That.
That. Okay. Apparently, this is a cool video. We've got the sound turned up as far as it can. You have to be quiet because it's only sound coming from here.
Introducing the next revolution in beauty. Get ready to experience a whole new you.
It's you, perfected.
Say goodbye to fine lines and wrinkles and hello to full lips, sparkling eyes, and lashes that never end. And that's just the beginning. Transform your look the way celebrities do with this beauty industry secret that's now available for the first time ever. Introducing Photoshop by Adobe. Finally look the way you've always dreamed. The difference is clear. Just one application of Photoshop can give you results so dramatic, they're almost unrealistic. Use Healing Brush to target blemishes at their source by simply erasing them. ProPixel Intensifying Botanical Hydrojargon Microbead Extract infused with nutritive volumizing technology will leave your face virtually unrecognizable.
My skin feels like plastic.
Take control of your color with Hue Saturation. Use this breakthrough formula to change hair or skin color, brighten eyes, whiten teeth, even adjust your race. Tired of fighting with your shape? Wish you could be a total knockout? Dial in the perfect you with Liquify. Reshape your body without the expense and mess of surgery. Why eat healthy and exercise when you can just look like you do? And the best part is,
It won't rub off.
the results don't lie. Pictures like this are all Photoshop. The celebrity beauty secret used in virtually every major magazine is now available to you. You don't have to rely on a healthy body image or self-respect anymore.
Now that's the power of Photoshop.
There's only one way to look like a real cover girl. Photoshop by Adobe.
Maybe she's born with it.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Photoshop.
Says it all, doesn't it, that one? That's great. That's great.
So, favourite part of the night. Any questions? We've got some photography instructors here, as well as our Photoshop instructors. So, any questions? What we've seen tonight?
That.
Next to the